So guys, hope you guys are having again a great Monday, and I wanted to go over with you tonight about who told you to be on a low sodium diet. It's one of these wives' tales that gets repeated over and over, in which there's actually no validity. In fact, the reason why they say to be on a low sodium diet really has to do with a study that was done long ago when they looked at people who had low blood pressure, and they studied them and they were on a very low sodium diet. But what they didn't tell you too is that they weren't diabetic, they didn't have, they weren't obese, and they also lived to be, in their 50s. All right, so low sodium diet, you probably have heard that before. So if someone's got high blood pressure, especially, the doctor says you need to restrict your salt because that somehow is going to make some kind of difference. I'm going to show you why that is absolutely 100% a wise tale. There's no truth, no validity to it, and I know it's probably going to make some people upset. But just remember, it's okay to be upset, but I want you to keep digging further. It's called cognitive dissonance. And so when someone presents to you a different way of thinking that challenges your current way of thinking, a lot of times we don't want to believe it. We get upset. Heck, some people, what they'll do is they'll actually attack the messenger rather than actually dive into the actual message. In fact, one of the things really to see really how mature you are with your way of thinking is to see if you can be presented with a new way of thinking and not try to attack the messenger. And on Facebook and social media, things like that, you actually do see that people are 45, 50, 55, 60 years of age, but literally they act like they are 10 or 12 or 14 years of age. So remember this, if you actually will see, because this is, again, a wise tale. Sodium gives you high blood pressure because my doctor says so, right? But just remember, there's a lot of stuff that just gets transmitted over and over and over just because the doctor said so, because it was just taught to them, really, but they never dive into actually really think, like, does this actually make sense? So I'm going to help you to think a lot differently when it comes to being on a low sodium diet and actually all minerals and electrolytes and things like that. So good evening, Kim. I see you on a lot of our stuff. I always appreciate it. And I'm glad that you're going to join us live for the first time. So let's talk about sodium, okay? Let's talk about this stuff, okay? So you actually go to Merck Manual. So Merck Manual, which if you know Merck produces a lot of pharmaceutical medications. And they have this famous publication called Merck Manual. And here's what they actually say. So let's go to the pharmaceutical companies and say, is there a role of sodium in the body, okay? Now watch this. So the overview of sodium's role in the body, all right? Sodium is one of the body's electrolytes, which are minerals that the body needs in relatively large amounts, okay? They just said large amounts. Electrolytes carry an electric charge when dissolved in body fluids, such as blood, so very important for blood volume, okay? Most of the body's sodium is located in the blood and the fluid around the cells. This is very important because it helps to maintain homeostatic balance in between the external environment of a cell and the internal environment of the cell. You remember that science experiment you did in high school that had that when you put salt in one, you saw the water go through the plastic bag into another part, and so it helps to maintain homeostasis. It's called osmosis, okay? Sodium helps the body keep fluids in normal balance. Sodium plays a key role in normal nerve and muscle function. The body obtains sodium through food and drink and loses it primarily in sweat and urine, very important for people working out. Healthy kidneys maintain a consistent level of sodium in the body by adjusting the amount excreted in the urine. When sodium consumption and loss are not in balance, the total amount of sodium in the body is affected. Remember about your kidneys, okay? The amount of sodium in the blood may be blah, 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 because I didn't screen capture the rest of it. Basically, what they're saying is that you need sodium in very high amounts. You also need sodium in order to maintain homeostasis between the internal and external environment of the cell, in order to maintain your blood volume, but also for your nerve system to be able to function. And when I talk to you about some of the symptoms of not having enough sodium, holy cow, you're going to say, look at the amount of sickness and amount of health issues that people have, and it literally could be just because of a deficiency in electrolytes and minerals. Now, you've heard the wives' tale, you see it all the time, and I got this article actually from the CDC. This was from WebMD, but it was from the CDC, and here's what they say. 90% of Americans get too much sodium. So they're consuming too much sodium. And guys, I'm going to tell you, if you actually knew how much sodium you need every single day, I will say conservatively, you need anywhere from 3,500 milligrams up to maybe 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams, which 5,000 milligrams is basically a good teaspoon. So a good teaspoon of sodium, but I'm going to show you where you should get it from at the end of this video. So here's what they say. Americans are getting way too much sodium, and here is the 5 foods that are going to be blamed for having too much sodium. Here's what they say. Yeast breads, chicken and mixed chicken dinners, pizza, pasta dishes, and finally, cold cuts, all right? Now, they say there's too much sodium in there, so you should avoid it, but I want you to think about something. It's not the sodium, it's the actual food. So think about this for a second. Breads, what are breads? So refined grains and a lot of gluten, a lot of inflammatory things that are going on. Chicken and mixed chicken dinners, okay? Now, I'm not gonna say that regular chicken, if you get a, like an organic, cage-free chicken, it's not gonna be high in sodium, but what they're talking about is really the chicken that comes from things that are in a package, and it's not necessarily the sodium as much as it's the MSG, the monosodium glutamate. So look that up, monosodium glutamate. It's a flavor enhancer. There's about 16 different names for it because everybody knows MSG is not good for you. So they just name it something different like yeast extract or natural flavoring. So MSG is actually considered a neurotoxin, all right? So something that you want to avoid. So basically we got gluten, refined grains, MSG, pizza, which is going to have refined grains, gluten, casein, which a lot of people have a food allergy to. And then you have pasta dishes, which is going to be, again, more MSG, more sugar within the actual pasta, also some more wheat gluten, refined grains, and then finally cold cuts, which is processed meats with nitrites in it. And guys, nitrites have actually the University, I think Hawaii and Honolulu said, yeah, you eat a lot of cold cut meats with a lot of nitrites, that actually will increase your risk of pancreatic cancer significantly. So they're blaming the salt, but I'm actually blaming the gluten, the refined pastas, the MSG, the casein, the amount of just sugar that's in pasta dishes. And really, yes, should you avoid those things? Yes, but not because of the salt, just because of that food in and of itself is extremely inflammatory. And long term, yes, it can actually cause an increase in blood pressure. This is one of the reasons why they say, restrict your salt because you don't want to get blood pressure. But I'm actually going to show you guys, you have mechanisms in place, okay? You have mechanisms in place to help regulate your sodium inside of your body. This is actually taking you back. You probably didn't even learn this in high school. We had to learn all of this stuff when it came to, all the pre-medicine and, the first year studies that you did, even in chiropractic school. Because basically we had to take medical boards. Our first part 1 was actually just a medical board. And so when you look at this, you have this whole idea between sodium balance inside of the body, and this can actually increase and this can actually decrease your blood pressure. So you have a fail-safe in place that's regulated by your kidneys, it's regulated by your lungs, and it's also regulated by your adrenal glands as well, okay? So I want to show you something really, really interesting, is because let's say that your blood pressure actually falls. Your body says, well, we need to get our blood pressure up. And there's a couple of mechanisms in place. It's extremely fascinating that can get your blood pressure up. One of them is just actually adrenaline. So adrenaline that's released from your adrenal glands can immediately get your blood pressure up. But when you talk about long term, what happens is that you can have, your kidneys are going to secrete an enzyme that's called renin. And renin actually will then interact with what's known as angiotensinogen, which is actually a protein produced by the liver, which is why even your liver can affect your blood pressure. And then that will actually turn into angiotensin 1, and then finally into angiotensin 2, which will then cause your blood pressure to rise. Now here's what's interesting, guys, because I want you to pay attention to this. To go from angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2, stick with me, is that there is an enzyme that needs to take place in order to convert it, and it's called angiotensin converting enzyme, okay? Angiotensin converting enzyme, this primarily happens within the lungs, okay? Do you guys know a medication that many, many people take that actually will block the action of this enzyme? and it's actually called an ACE inhibitor. And you guys know what that is for. That is to lower blood pressure. Okay, this is a lower blood pressure called an ACE inhibitor, very common blood pressure medication, and it actually acts the level of the lungs. Now, I'm going to give you a quick fact. Guys, this is why one of the side effects of being on an ACE inhibitor is actually having a dry, hacking cough. Let me say that again. If you are on an ACE inhibitor, one of the side effects is having a dry, hacking cough, and it's because the mechanism of action actually happens at the lungs. Let's say this happens though, and your blood pressure rises, and then on top of that, you also have the release of what's known as aldosterone from the adrenal glands, a very common hormone, and then that will actually make you retain water, and both of those things are actually going to work in conjunction in order to you to retain or hold on to sodium at the level of the kidneys so that your blood pressure will rise because it's osmosis, okay? So it's going to increase your blood volume, which will then increase your blood pressure. So people actually will think that, wow, maybe if I just restrict this, my blood pressure is actually going to go lower. But just remember, guys, you actually have other mechanisms in place to actually help you get rid of sodium too. And this happens at the level of the kidneys, and it interacts with the lungs, and it interacts with the adrenal glands. Guys, this is what I want to show you after this long kind of maybe technical description, is because of this, is that the body is a masterpiece. It's a Swiss watch, and now you can see how literally all of these hormones are playing together just with blood pressure, how the kidneys, how the adrenal glands, and how the lungs are playing together like a Swiss watch so that all of these things actually work together. And this is why where medicine fails terribly is because they just think that everything is just a this for that, and they don't take into effect how taking one medication affects all of these other body medications as well. And guys, by the time you start getting into 2, 3, 4 medication, they have no idea what's happening into the body as far as all the side effects and how it's actually, playing into all of these other side effects, which is why you have all these side effects, and you go to the doctor and they just give you another medication for that side effect. So guys, it's very, very sophisticated. And we gotta stop playing God. Like we think that we know everything about the body, because for every action, there is 10 different reactions taking place inside of the body. But just to point out, you have something in place when it comes to your sodium retention or getting rid of sodium, and it happens at the level of the kidneys. Now, you do actually need healthy kidneys in order for that to happen. Let's talk about the daily requirements of just some minerals or some electrolytes. So sodium, this is going to blow you out of the water. So a bare minimum of sodium. This is going to be different for every single person depending on how big they are. It's going to be different with how much they sweat, their exercise activity, things like that. Sodium can be anywhere from 1,500 milligrams up to sometimes even more than 5,000 milligrams, which is basically a whole teaspoon. Okay, you need this. I'm going to show you why. On top of that, you also need the mineral potassium, which means about 4,000 milligrams minimum, but you can get, yes, up to 8, 9, and 10,000 milligrams of potassium. In fact, I recommend to get about 2.5 times the amount of potassium for sodium. Now, just remember this, sodium and potassium at the level of the kidneys actually work against one another, which means if you hang on to sodium, you will actually lose a lot more potassium, okay? And then finally, you have things like magnesium. So you need magnesium as well, 350 to 450 milligrams. That's a bare minimum as far as how much magnesium that you need. Even when you look at potassium, if you are getting 5,000 to 6,000 milligrams of potassium, that is a lot of potassium. I'm going to show you the sources and why you are most likely very deficient in all of these minerals. And this is what a lot of times we start trying to get people better. It's just about trying to get some minerals into their body because they are so mineral deficient, either because of bad diet or just flat out bad advice. So let me show you why sodium is so important. Number one, if you look at this right here, for all of your cells, to make sure that they don't either explode or shrivel up into nothing, every single cell has what's known as a sodium and potassium pump. And so this sodium potassium pump is always trying to keep this hydrostatic pressure to keep the cell at a certain level. So if you get too little sodium, it shrinks. You get too much sodium going in, it can actually cause the cell to actually burst. If you have a problem with not enough sodium, you can see how it will affect literally every single cell inside of the body. But on top of that, your nerve system, your brain, your spinal cord, for you to be able to do this, for you to be able to jump, run, for you to be able to lift, even for your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nerve system, which is running organ function, speeding it up and slowing it down, all of that runs on what's known as an action potential. And in order to carry that action potential or that electricity, it runs on what's known as a sodium-potassium pump, which means if you are deficient in sodium and or deficient in potassium, you will cause some major issues with your nerve system, anything that needs an action potential. So thought, yes. Memories, yes. Your ability to lift, yes. Cramping up, yes. Your heart is a muscle, yes. Literally, digestive system, all of that stuff that needs the nerve system to be able to work the way that it's supposed to. Guys, what about magnesium? Oh my goodness. Magnesium, guys. If you are getting blown away by this, can you please do one thing? I saw one person do this. Please share this. Please share this so that at least at a very minimum, people can start actually getting some minerals into their body. Well, let's talk about magnesium, okay? Magnesium in the body is responsible for over 300 enzymatic reactions inside of the body, including the most basic cycle that occurs literally hundreds of trillions of times inside of your little powerhouses, the mitochondria inside of your cell. And it's called the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle. And you learned this if you took biochemistry, either in college or if you took it in postgraduate school. And it's terrible because at one point we had to be able to write out, let me see if I go the right way, this whole thing by memory, okay? But when you look at this, for the body to produce, this is how the body produces energy from oxygen, aerobic energy, which is what most cells are doing at any given moment, you actually need magnesium. Guys, if you are magnesium deficient, then anything that has a mitochondria, which is every single cell inside of your body, cannot carry out this citric acid cycle, and it cannot produce energy from oxygen. And basically, the basic unit of energy in the body is called ATP. It cannot do it because it absolutely needs magnesium in order to be able to carry out these problems. This is why, if you become magnesium deficient, this is why you cramp up. Because the cells, the nerve system is affected, and also the muscle cells as well. So you absolutely need magnesium. And remember this, there's also something that a muscle that you need your whole life to be very strong, and it's actually your heart. And magnesium, yes, needs that as too, because the heart is actually a muscle. So let's talk about the symptoms of sodium deficiency, guys. This is gonna blow you out of the water. How do I know, Dr. Nate, if I am deficient in sodium? Okay, well, here's the first thing. Dizziness and falls. Now, let me tell you something. Dizziness and falls affects a lot of people over 70 years of age. Am I right or am I not right? In fact, one of the leading causes of death is actually dizziness and falls after 70 years of age. So they have some kind of accident. You are deficient in sodium if you experience a lot of dizziness. And the reason why, if you have a deficiency of sodium, you can actually become very deficient in what is known as adrenaline. And adrenaline is what helps you actually to increase your blood pressure when you get up from a seated position, or when you get up from laying down, or when you quickly change directions and things like that. And so a lot of times, people who are getting up from a seated position and they're absolutely just dizzy all the time, check their sodium to make sure that they're getting enough sodium, okay? How about fatigue? So yes, you can have fatigue. One of the reasons why is being chronically sodium deficient actually will cause you to kick out a lot of aldosterone from your adrenal glands, which again, the adrenal glands are kicking out all of these different types of hormones, and you can fatigue the adrenal glands by being chronically sodium deficient. How about lack of energy? Again, linking that back to the adrenal glands, lacking that back to the brain energy and things like that. Mental confusion, again, because you need sodium for your nerve system. And yes, your brain is your nerve system. How about nausea? So if you are getting nauseous a lot, it can be a sign of sodium deficiency. Even acid reflux. How many people knew for you to be able to produce hydrochloric acid, you also need sodium? Weak muscles. So if you're like, I don't know why I can't set a PR today, my bench press or deadlift was absolutely terrible, you could have sodium deficiency because, again, that is what is carrying the action potential and allowing the nerve to innervate the muscle to allow it to be able to contract. How about atrial fibrillation? Now, here's what's interesting. Someone came to me, they're like, Dr. Nate, so-and-so, they had a heart attack, and they're on a low salt diet, and they're not doing very good. I'm like, let me guess. They've now been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. They're like, yeah, how'd you know? And I said, well, you restrict your salt and you're going to have atrial fibrillation. And now they're going to go in and want to do some kind of procedure in order to start, blocking or starting to burn out some of those muscle cells so that it can start to beat the way that it was supposed to. And yes, you can even see an increase in blood pressure when you have sodium deficiency, guys. You cannot make this up. Now, what about potassium deficiency? So if you are deficient in potassium, constipation, you might have you feeling like your heart is skipping a beat. You might have heart palpitations. Again, fatigue, muscle damage, muscle weakness, muscle spasm. One of the telltale signs is you get chronic tingling and numbness, like in the feet or into the hands. Now, I realized I was actually potassium deficient probably about 6 or 7 weeks ago because I was just getting a lot of muscle pain. I actually pulled my calf muscle doing something regular, relatively like not that strenuous. But I would work out and man, it was just like my muscles, it just felt like they got punched. And so I'm like, I went and looked back and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm probably potassium deficient. So I started increasing the amount of potassium that I was taking a lot. And it took a couple of days, but I felt a whole heck of a lot better when I started to make sure. But just remember, if you are working out and exercising, this makes it even more important to make sure that you are replacing your electrolytes, sodium, magnesium, potassium, a lot more because you can lose this obviously through your sweat. Now, what about magnesium deficiency? Again, you can have numbness, tingling, muscle cramps, even seizures. You can have spasms in the muscle. It can change your personality, abnormal heart rhythms again. And guys, you have no idea how many people they said the doctor found an abnormal heartbeat, abnormal or fibrillation and things like that. And I'm like, first thing you need to do before you run off and you're going to get a cardiac ablation, make sure you increase your minerals. And I had one woman, I was like, took mega dose her on minerals, and lo and behold, the arrhythmia went away. So this is not the first time that this has actually happened. Okay. Now this is also interesting too, how this actually can change your personality. Because if you guys actually know, when you start supplementing with magnesium, you'll realize that you actually will calm down and you actually will relax. So this is why, like if someone's constipated, for example, we'll give them some high doses of magnesium in order to get their bowels moving again, because magnesium, yes, will actually relax soft muscle and things like that. And I also might add, for people who have a lot of fascial tightness, like plantar fasciitis or IT band syndrome, guys, start to increase your minerals, especially magnesium, and you can see that those things will start to relax, especially, okay? So let's go over the sources. I know somebody actually asked that already. Don't worry, I knew you were going to ask that. So let's talk about some of the best sources of getting these minerals in, all right? First of all, a lot of you are going to say, well, I'm just going to take sodium chloride, which is table salt. Sodium chloride is no good. It's not good, okay? The reason why is, yes, you have sodium, and yes, you have chloride, but the other thing is, too, is that there are bleachers in it. There's just other harsh chemicals that they use in order to manufacture sodium chloride. So what you need to be making instead should be unrefined sea salt. Unrefined sea salt or pink Himalayan salt. Now, unrefined sea salt should actually look dark. It should look grayish. You should see some speckles in it. Unrefined sea salt is, yes, going to have sodium in it, but it's also going to have other minerals, and it will also have iodine in it as well. Now, just remember that there's a lot of things out there that will say sea salt, but it is still bleached. So if you're getting sea salt and it's still white, then it is truly not a sea salt or an unrefined sea salt. So unrefined sea salt, or look for pink Himalayan salt. Now, here's what's interesting if you even want to take it a step further. A lot of those grinders have metal grinders in them. So here you have the little chunks of salt and you grind it to become more fine. You really want to look for like a ceramic grinder and not a metal grinder, because that metal is actually made of nickel, and over time you can start getting nickel as you grind it into the actual salt. And again, nickel is a metal, and there are a lot of people that react pretty bad to nickel, including myself, because a lot of my, I have some crowns in my teeth, and those crowns actually were plated with nickel. I got them out and actually got them plated with actual gold, because that does not react inside of the body. So you want to have something that has a ceramic a grater in there that's going to break down that sea salt or that Himalayan salt. Now, what about potassium? So potassium. So you can get it from food, and again, you got to eat a lot of these foods in order to get it, and that's why you should be eating so many veggies and things like that. So where can you get it at? Avocados, yes. Spinach, sweet potatoes, coconut water is a great source of potassium. Beets, broccoli, mushrooms, beans, nuts, meat, and poultry, yes, will have potassium. But what happens if you are potassium deficient or you need extra potassium? Will take potassium citrate, and I actually average about I want to say about 2,000 milligrams of just taking it as potassium citrate, just because of working out, and I tend to lose a lot of minerals and things like that. But yes, you absolutely can get it from sources of food. Basically anything that's going to come up from the ground is going to have potassium. But this actually goes into this whole idea between organic and non-organic, and how is it grown, is the soil depleted and whatnot, because you need to get minerals from the soil that actually ends up in the food that we actually eat. So what about magnesium? Great source of magnesium is green leafy vegetables. Another one is going to be nuts and seeds, actually preferably raw, guys, nuts and seeds. But then also too, yes, you can get magnesium in the form of what is known as relax, okay? So relax, so yes, we will have people. So about a teaspoon is gonna be about 40% of your daily value of it. We give relax for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes they're nervous. If they're magnesium deficient, they tend to have a lot of anxiety. If you're magnesium deficient, you can be very constipated. If you're magnesium deficient, you can have a lot of tightness in through the muscles and things like that. And you start to get magnesium back to normal. Those things can actually go away, okay? So those are some great sources. We always say, hey, get it from food. But even for me, I'm never perfect when it comes to my nutrition. In fact, right now, last week I started on a 3-day fast. And so I went from Sunday to Wednesday. So I literally didn't eat anything, just got some minerals in and a lot of water. And right now, with our Man Up Challenge that we have, I am actually I'm restricting my food for 18 hours, only eating for 6. There's nothing magical about it other than, it's just avoids mindless eating and things like that. So in 6 hours, I got to get my food in. And so it's hard to get a lot of the minerals that you need in that short amount of time. A lot of times it just feels like you're eating plates and plates of vegetables as well. So this is why I supplement, a little bit more, because even I'm not perfect when it comes to my nutrition. All right, let's talk about working out, guys. Working out. So how many of you actually work out and nobody told you about that you need to replace the minerals? This actually happens to a lot of athletes because they start working out and they're not replacing their minerals, and things are going to go pretty good for, I don't know, a couple of months, and then you notice that they start becoming a little bit mineral deficient, and so they're tired, their muscles are sore, they're not as strong as they were, and yes, that can be due to a lot of other things, but first thing is just start trying to add some more minerals. So if you work out, don't just drink water, okay? Don't just drink water with minerals, okay? So here's what I want you to do. So if you're gonna take 32 ounces of water, just don't drink just water. Because remember, if you're drinking water without the minerals, you can actually die of an electrolyte imbalance. So always, have water with a purpose. So I recommend 32 ounces of water, add a 1/4 teaspoon of unrefined sea salt. It's gonna be probably about maybe 1,000 milligrams of sea salt. Take a teaspoon of relax, mix it together, and take 1,000 milligrams, or about 4 of the potassium citrate pills. per 32 ounces of water, okay? So if you're gonna drink water, you know, people say, how much water should I be drinking? Well, go according to your thirst. You have thirst, it is accurate, and it should be there. It's more than I can say for hunger, because yes, your hunger can actually go really awry when your insulin levels start to elevate, and so do your leptin levels. As the more fat cells you put on, the more you become leptin resistant, and the more that your hunger becomes a liar, big time. But yes, you do have thirst, and rely on your thirst, and so drink water. You know, everybody is going to be different, because I don't know your activity levels, but you know, you should be drinking at least, you know, 2 to 3 of these every single day, okay? So that way you're getting amount of, you know, at least you're replacing your potassium, you're replacing your magnesium, and you're replacing your sea salt all the time, especially if you are working out, okay? So hopefully, guys, that makes a lot of sense. Please share this. I always appreciate that, because again, who on earth told you that you need to be on a low salt diet? You are hurting yourself more than you're helping yourself by being on a low sodium diet. What you need to be is you need to be on good food. And yes, you should get rid of the sodium chloride, the refined salt. Start adding unrefined sea salt or Himalayan pink salt. Start adding foods high in magnesium, foods high in potassium. And eat that, guys. Eat that until the cows come home. But remember, when you're eating things like pasta, when you're eating things like with MSG, when you're eating things like pizza, and you're eating things that they say are high in sodium, guys, it's not the sodium as much as it's just all of the other crap that you are eating when you are consuming those foods. Things like processed flour, grains, casein, wheat gluten, all of those MSG, all of those things are creating inflammation inside of the body. And you know what? When you have high inflammation, yes, your blood pressure actually will go up as a response to the inflammation. Just remember, you have kidneys. They're there for a reason. They're working. And so start focusing on lower inflammation. Get your minerals in. And stop worrying about the sodium diet. And when your doctor tells you to do that, just ask him, hey doc, can you show me where you got that research from? And he'll look at you probably like you have a third eye. Because again, it's just, I heard it from someone else, and it just keeps going. Remember, if you keep telling a lie long enough and loud enough, eventually everyone will listen.